All right, good day to everybody. Welcome to another Faith-Seeking Understanding. I am Allan, your host. I am a pastor, retired professor. I am a Bible moth, a theologian in exile, and a peddler of hope. And I am the self-appointed Anselm of Canterbury Chair of Podcast Theology and Culture here at Faith-Seeking Understanding University, a completely fabricated institution of higher learning, but where all seekers are invited to ponder profound things free of charge. And here we are with the one and only unique, and everybody who knows him at least says this, Michael Cruz.
This is true.
Who is the Grand Poobah Chair of Theology and Culture podcast? I'm sorry. Economics and Public Theology here at FSUU. I keep thinking about a mascot, Michael. Maybe what we ought to do is have there's a GIF or an animated GIF, or I don't know what they call it. I think it's I can't think of his name. He plays Iron Man. He's you can get it, and he's rolling his eyes. So that maybe that should be our somebody rolling their eyes. Anyway. All right, so our subject today is mainstream media, purveyors of truth or peddlers of propaganda. So we'll talk about that, but first, of course, as always, a little sports. My Guardians always start out slow, and they are starting out slow. And by the way, I'm also concerned. I've got some concerns about their pitching. So I'm hoping that maybe it'll, pick up, but I don't know.
Well, fortunately for you and me, I'm in the same division. The whole division has started out slow. So hopefully, I think the Royals are in last place in that division. They've only won like 7 or 8 games, but they're still only 9 games out of first place. They're still under 2 games out. So I don't know. We'll see if our teams can turn it around. But
it's really bad, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. I think the Eastern Division, all the teams are above 500, something like that. So,
Okay. So anyway, folks, folks, to let you know, with the video, we got a little bit of internet instability here, just so you know, in case our lip syncing isn't really good. But hopefully the most important thing is that the audio is working. So anyway, okay, and of course the NFL draft was in your Kansas City there, and
it was.
I don't really follow the draft. It's never something that's interested me. But that's a big thing for some people. You and I were talking about that. Some people just really get into that.
Yeah, anyway, it was fun to walk over and visit a couple times, but I personally don't find the big appeal for it. It's fun to see all the crowds, all the people excited to be there, and so on. It's good for them, but. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm gonna see the game. That's about all I'm interested in.
You're like me. When you go into something you're not really big on, but you can say, I was there,
Yeah, right.
I was at a draft, yeah. Well, how was it? I don't know. It didn't stay long.
Right.
So anyway, all right, good. All right, well, we got to get into the subject at hand. And it is, and I don't like the term mainstream media, because that was a term used I think originally by people who didn't like the mainstream media.
Right.
And I'm always whatever that meant. I mean, they wanted to be different from the media, that they had some information, or that they were purveyors of truth in a way that the mainstream folks were not. And I always get suspicious when you start using labels that originally are intended to be pejorative, right? Bothers me. But I used it because we all use it, and it's clickbait. So anyway, so let's talk about journalism. If you do consistent polls in America about journalism, they do not, as far as, do you admire the media? Do you admire journalists? The only people who fare worse than them are politicians.
Maybe. Yeah.
And that's not saying, there's a part of me that says I'm not surprised politicians are at the bottom. So let's start out just talking this. I want to get into some history of journalism in America and other things. But I don't have the negative views of journalism that a lot of people do. I mean, there's things, modern journalism, and certain things that really need to be called out. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And there's been some egregious things that have happened. But in general, I think that if we are cautious and if we are diligent, I think in general we can get the truth about the world from the media. What do you think?
I think that's probably true. Yes.
Yeah.
The media combined with other sources of information that are available, entities and organizations that publish information, what do I want to say, credible organizations that collect data, polling organizations, scientific organizations, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think, and then the media always tries to synthesize and to make sense out of topics, and they're always, of course, doing it from a particular perspective. But that's still a useful thing to see, is somebody's perspective that's doing it with integrity, even if I don't agree with it. If it's done with integrity, it can be very helpful. Yeah.
And, I think sometimes, to be honest, when we paint these broad brushes on anything, not just the media, it really is an excuse for us to be intellectually lazy. Well,
Right.
all the media stinks. And I've had people say to me, how do you know what's even true anymore? Which I want to say,
Right.
quit being intellectually lazy.
Right.
And it's the same thing about politicians. I mean, when there are certain scandals with presidents or other politicians, the justification is well, they all do it. He just got caught.
Yeah,
To which I want to say, no, stop that. That is not true. Stop being lazy. No, there are plenty of politicians who try to do the right thing and who in general do what they do, discharge it with integrity.
Right.
So, don't excuse crappy behavior with well, they all do it kind of a thing. And it's the same thing with the media. We're going to talk about Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon here in a little bit.
Right.
The egregious behavior of certain political pundits doesn't mean they're all egregious in that way. That doesn't mean that they don't tell the truth, at least as they understand it. It doesn't mean that they're not attempting to be fair. So we just can't use this. They're all bad because it's just a dodge. It's just an excuse it's an excuse for me not to do the diligent work that you need to do in an information overloaded world now, to do the hard work of trying to figure out what is true and what isn't.
Right. And I'll just add to that the thing about, well, it's all bad, you can't tell what's truth anymore, almost always comes out of the mouth of someone who 2 sentences later is telling you emphatically that something's true about some particular political issue that they have strong feelings about. So where did you get that information? If there's no way to tell what the truth is, how can you have such a strong conviction that what you're saying is the truth? So obviously you do believe that there are some things that are more true than the other.
Yeah.
And it's really just a dodge not to have the intellectual discussion, to weigh facts, to have discussions about the merits of various arguments, that type of thing. So yeah, it's a dodge. It's not a it's challenging. I mean, getting to the truth can often be challenging, but it's this idea that there's no way to get at any truth is it's just an excuse.
And I like the one where someone will post a link to an article from a quote unquote non-mainstream media source. And we'll say, well, why isn't the mainstream media reporting this? And so then I get on, do a little Google search, and then I've got all these stories from the mainstream media on this story. And so I'll post a link and say, apparently they are. Well, the reason why you don't think they're reporting it is because you don't look at those sites. Right?
And somebody told you they weren't. Yeah.
And somebody told you they weren't. So you just passed it around. They're not reporting this. Well, no, actually, yes, they are. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So let's move into a little bit of history, because I've actually done a little reading on the history of journalism in America. And I crack up at well, first of all, we like to say there was this pristine time of journalists who just reported the facts. And you probably can make some kind of an argument for that back in the 50s and 60s, the years of Walter Cronkite, Edgar R. Murrow and that kind of thing. We probably should talk a little bit about that. But back in the 18th century, Sam Adams, who was a patriot for the Continental cause, he had a newspaper. He made up stories about British atrocities that just weren't true.
Right.
He just made them up. And you had, you know, I mean, I think the difference is that I don't think they really tried to peddle this stuff as truth. They just, you know, they just made it up. And it was like,
Right.
and George Washington, he gets into office and he just gets so fed up with journalists. And so there's this famous, I think it's a letter he writes to somebody. And he refers to the journalists as infamous scribblers, right?
Right.
Just infamous scribblers. And so, you know, this kind of, I don't want to even call it serious news work. The gumshoe journalism, as the old saying goes.
Right.
But this kind of nonsense of just even making stuff up and twisting things is not new in
Right.
American journalism.
Right. Right. Well, and as we talked earlier, the 1800s, many of the newspapers down to this day still contain some of these names. You know, the Smithville Democrat, the Jonesville Republican. You know, you got these papers that were created to be mouthpieces for a particular point of view, and that used to be 150 years ago. And coming forward from that a little bit, that was how news was done. You had competing voices putting out their side of the news, and the consumer of the news had to use some discretion and discernment if they really wanted to know what the truth was. You had to look at those. So that, in that sense, it's not all that new. What we're looking at today actually may be more what was typical than what was typical 40, 50 years ago, where there was more focus on trying to be objective and nonpartisan. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. So this has been around for a long time. Now, I mean, we do make distinctions, rightly so, between certain kinds of journalism. So you get, you know, you get the news, the people who just report the news, right? So, you know, such and such happened today, this happened today. They interview people, and then you get, you know, you get the op-ed folks. You get, you know, the op-ed page of the Wall Street Journal, which tends to lean more conservative. You get the op-ed page of the New York Times, tends to be more liberal. And you get the same thing with cable news and others. You know, you get the evening, you know, they're not news shows. They're, you know, but they're pundits who, you know, they're in the business to give you their spin on what is happening.
Right.
And you know, when I read an op-ed, and by the way, I don't. Well, we cut the cable cord, so we don't have cable anymore. But I haven't watched the evening cable news shows and cable shows in years, because they're not. It's one thing to listen to a thoughtful pundit who has a slant, conservative or liberal, and who has a slant, but it attempts to understand what's going on, what I call fairly.
Right.
And I got to tell you what, that doesn't exist on evening cable news.
Yeah.
Because these people, I mean, I call them peddlers of snake oil.
You're right.
And so I used to watch them, but I haven't watched any of them in a long time, even before we cut the cable cord, because it was just, I'm not looking for nonsense. I'm not looking for these people. I mean, because it's ratings driven, isn't it? They have a stake in ginning up their base, keeping their viewers angry about something. So they'll come back and tune in the next night. That's really what their job is. And so they just, I mean, I just think to myself, look, if you want to read opinion pieces that you will find congenial, but that are really good opinion pieces, you can find them. You're not going to find them on the cable news in the evening, so just turn it off.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I with you, I have not sat down, watch a cable evening news broadcast in a very long time. I do occasionally watch on YouTube. The various news channels will have snippets about a particular topic that was on one of the channels. That'll go 5, 7, 12 minutes, something like that. And I do occasionally watch those because I'm curious to see how that particular pundit is casting things in terms of the topic. Because that's what you're going to start seeing reflected in social media and various other places. Kind of gives you a window as to how it's being framed. But to just sit down and watch the cable news as a source of news, if anything, I watch it to be a pointer to what the topics are that people may be interested in, so I can go look to find out what the real story is, not because I'm trusting that newscast to give me the accurate story. Yeah.
No, I that's absolutely right. And so I just think, so one of the things on this that, well, let's back up just a little bit. So there was a time years ago before cable when you had the major networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC. And you really didn't get a lot of news. You don't get 24-hour news, right? You get, you had, I don't know what the times do, what the times are in Kansas City, but here on the Eastern Standard Time, local news was 6 o'clock, 6 to 6:30, and you watched whatever local station you wanted. And then from 6:30 to 7, you would get the world news, Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America, right?
Right. From St. Joseph, Missouri.
Yeah, I remember Frank Reynolds and Peter Jennings and Tom Brokaw. And they did seem to be really competent in purveying news. And it didn't mean that they may have bias, because we're all biased. You can't get rid of your implicit bias.
Right.
But it did seem like they were attempting to give you the story of what happened as best as they could gather the information.
Right.
And what I think, and I don't think this is a profound insight, I think others have said this, what happened was Ted Turner, ends up with CNN, and it's 24/7 news, and then the race is on to gather ratings. And the way you gather ratings, unfortunately, is to see which network, when it comes to quote unquote news, can peddle what's the most outrageous.
Right. And then that follows up later with the creation of social media that ends up being the same thing, where the way that you make money is getting clicks. So creating the most outrageous headline, the craziest stories, that type of thing that push people's buttons, that's how you get your money. That's where the money is. Yeah. So there is a competition between sort of getting eyes on your source versus actually reporting the truth, which may be more bland and uninteresting than what readers want to read if you don't have all the clickbait stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So two things, and I think they're connected. The first is, let's talk about that as far as cable news and ratings being the driver, and money, obviously. And then talk about those of us who consume this stuff and the issues there. I just read a recent article that they conducted a poll, and the majority of Americans blame our current political division on the media.
Right.
To which I want to say, I don't think that's completely wrong, but physicians, heal yourself, because they would not be so partisan if you and I turned it off. Right. I mean, they're giving us what we want. So let's get into that, because we had these two stories recently. On the same day, Fox News fires Tucker Carlson, who is their biggest draw. I mean, by far, he's 3 million viewers a night, which dwarfs everybody else. And then you've got CNN gets rid of Don Lemon, who's had his own problems over the years. I wouldn't say he was as egregious as Carlson. Carlson's kind of in a class all by himself, in my view. But still, Don Lemon had his problems. Chris Cuomo had his problems at CNN. One night, the last night I watched Chris Cuomo, we were sitting there watching it, and I just got so disgusted with his whole approach to everything. I finally said to Carol was sitting there, my wife, and I said, I'm not going to watch this guy anymore. I said, if you want to watch him, let me know so I can go do something else. And she said to me, I was wondering why you had it on as long as you did. Yeah. Right. And so, the thing that happens is, because this is so driven by money and media and advertisers, you want to keep viewers. And so one of the things that has come out, particularly in the lawsuit that Dominion voting has against Fox and others. And I'm sure, by the way, you could find emails like this at the other cable news networks, but they're not being sued.
Right.
Is how they're just really working to pander to the viewers. They want to make sure they don't lose them. Right. And to again, another case in point, at the 2020 election, Fox is the first cable network to correctly call Arizona for Joe Biden. And what happens? Everybody turns the channel. They don't want to hear that. It's got to be wrong. And by the way, the guy who prognosticated that at Fox loses his job eventually.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And now Tucker is gone, and Fox News ratings have dropped, and apparently, is it Newsmax? I think has picked up some of their stuff. Yeah. And so here's what I want to say. Two things. First, okay, if you don't think this is proof that cable news, particularly the evening shows, is not interested in the truth as much as they are as the ratings, I don't know what hole you're living in. That's the first thing.
Right.
The second thing is, again, to the watchers, do your best, because confirmation bias is hard for all of us, right? Because we do gravitate toward those things that confirm us as opposed to, question us. If you really are concerned about the truth, put your confirmation bias on the shelf. Right. This is not about, they fired Tucker Carlson, they fired Don Lemon, and I really liked what they had to say because they basically agreed with me and confirmed what I believe about the world. And I can't get that now anymore with Fox, with Tucker Carlson or Don Lemon. So I'm going to go elsewhere to find somebody who will just pat me on the back and tell me I'm right. This is not, Michael.
Right.
This is not the way you pursue the truth. This is not what you do, so anyway, I'm going to stop there because I think I need, because this gets me animated. Because we're going to talk in a minute and talk a little bit about Christians and truth. This gets me animated because this, in so many ways, strikes the heart of what it means to follow Jesus and have the character of Christ, the issue of truth. So we'll get to that, but I need to stop, take a breath, and let you respond.
Well, I'm just going to add that I think that one of the things that has just become clear and clear to me over the years is that, and this is partly about myself, learning about myself, but just humanity in general, is that we are driven by narratives, the narratives that we have about how the world works. That's what filters, that's the filter that we use when we look for what is the truth, is the narrative that we already have. And that's inescapable. You can't completely escape that. Nobody can. And so we all have that to some degree. But I think as a Christian, we are, because we know that we are both simple and that we are imperfect, that we of all people should be ones who are a bit skeptical of our own narrative and be willing to try to seek out for things that don't confirm our narrative. Yeah. Because we know of our frailties and our ability to do that. I think that was also, strangely enough, I think a perception in a stretch here maybe, but I think of the founders of the Constitution understood that people were failed and that they were frail, and that there was this trying to find a balance between democracy, but they didn't want mob rule, but they also didn't want centralized control over government. There was the sense that people were frail in many ways. And so I think that recognizing that we don't always have exactly what the truth is, and to have some of that humility. I think it was one theologian says that, I can't remember what the word he used was, but he called himself as being, having a tentative theology, which meant that you can't just go through life keeping all options open and saying that you don't know what the truth is, but you'd never be able to function. You have to make decisions at time. So we make our decisions, but we can still hold that thing that we understand to be truth, to be the narrative of how the world works. We can hold that tentatively and always be saying, where might I be wrong? Where might there be more information that would tell me otherwise? And so being willing to have that openness and conversation. So none of us are ever primarily driven by just seeking facts. That I don't think that's in the human condition. In fact, some people suggest that language and storytelling, anthropologists suggest this, actually came because the storytelling was about creating a unified view to create cohesion among community, not to give you accurate information about the world. That's how storytelling began. So I think to me that's one of the biggest challenges in trying to figure out what's going on with the world and to cut through the world of media, is to recognize all these different narratives are at work, and I need to have some humility about how I go about looking at things.
Yeah. And I think one of the geniuses, again, we talk about, and this has been obviously noted, one of the geniuses of the Constitution. And I've never met an argument against Enlightenment liberalism I haven't liked. So, you know, but you know, one of the geniuses of the Constitution is the checks and balances of the branches. It's basically, people can't be trusted with too much power. They can't be trusted with too much, you know, they just can't. Now, they obviously embody that imperfectly, just as we do. But the ideal is something to strive for. That at the end of the day, I need to say, okay, I think I'm a decent person, but that doesn't mean that I should always be trusted. Okay, depending on what the circumstances are. And I think problem right now is that we don't apply that same kind of humility and rigor. I mean, toward news and how we get our information. By the way, Michael, when you were talking about the tentative theology, I was just saying to somebody the other day, we were on an issue kind of like this, and I said, it seems to me that it is very possible for human beings to go through life with very firm convictions and yet be humble about it.
Yes, right.
And that is that I really believe this strongly. I've thought about issue A, and I believe it, and I think strongly, but I will never be closed off to the idea that somebody might at some point say something that's going to make me wonder whether I'm right.
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 And I just remembered that the phrase this theologian used was tentative finality.
Tentative finality. Good.
That in the end, you have to have a view of what you're going to do because you have to act. But you can always do that with a tentativeness that says, I'm open, I'm searching, I'm trying to learn and grow and be different. Yeah,
that's good language. I like that. Yeah, that's really good. Tentative. If you find that who said it, I'd like to know. If you get it,
okay, sure.
Find it. Just you know, message it to me or something like that.
I'll do.
So let's look at. I want to look at a couple things on the board here that on the screen and talk about. And this is a chart, and you've seen it. Been around for a while. Can you see it, Michael?
It's spinning at the moment, but it may pop up here just yet.
Okay, because I don't want it to be spinning with the people watching. By the way, if you're on podcast, I will put the link in the description. So can you see it?
Mine's still buffering, but
there are times when just Zoom just irritates.
Oh, there it is. Now it's up.
All right, so you've seen this. And it gives the media bias. So first of all, one of the things we have to say, and I think you and I would agree on this, there's no such thing as unbiased journalism, just like there's no such thing as unbiased anything. We all have a position, and we all have implicit bias. And so do journalists, so do media outlets. I've always said that the issue is not to be unbiased because you can't be, but the issue is to be fair. You know, at the end of the day, so here's the way I would characterize it. So if you and I, Michael, disagreed on an issue, okay, to pick an issue, whatever, we disagree on. I can't be unbiased to stand from a view from nowhere to completely understand your point. But what I can do is try to be fair in understanding what you believe. So that, in other words, if someone says to me, hey, what does Michael Cruz think about issue Z? And I say, well, here's his general position. At the end of the day, you should be able to recognize my understanding of your position and say, yes, that's exactly right. Right.
Exactly. Right. I agree.
What you need to be, what I don't want you to say is when you get to the end and said, I don't believe that. Right. Right. Because that's caricature. Right. Right. So at the end of the day, journalists can't be unbiased, but they should be fair. And you're going to be, and you've got fair journalists who lean left, and you've got fair journalists who lean right. I mean, right. So here's this chart. So, and I actually think this chart for the most part is pretty accurate.
I agree.
I don't know. I might put, some of these groups a little bit in a different place, but for the most part. So if you've got, Fox News, you've got skews right between hyper-partisan right. And of course, what they do, if I understand what this media company did, Ad Fontes Media Company, is that they took a collective of, journalism and pundits. So it's all mixed in.
Right.
So, it's not that. So when you see Fox News between skews right and hyper-partisan right, doesn't mean that every journalist, every talking head is that. It just means
Right.
that when they at the end of the day, they put it all in a blender and mix it up. This is what you get. So you get Fox News over there. They put CNN skews left, and I'm sure there's those on the right who would want to put them farther. MSNBC is close to the hyper-partisan left, and in general,
Right.
I would agree with that. I would say there was a time back during the George W. Bush presidency when they were really left. I mean, in the days of Keith Olbermann was just as I just got to the place where I could not stomach Tucker Carlson, I could not stomach Keith Olbermann.
Right. Yes.
So
I hear you.
just so that you all know, those of you who are listening or watching, that I always say when it comes to politics, I'm an equal opportunity annoyer. And so I just couldn't stand listening to him because I thought like Tucker Carlson, to be honest, he was a shill. And I wasn't interested in that. And so anyway, without commenting any more on this, what are your thoughts as far as, I think and we're going to talk about a website you mentioned to me here in a moment. I think it's important to have something like this. I think it's important so that when I read something, I know people who have, people will say, like, when I posted this, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago on social media, someone said to me, well, that sort of, he said, I think that sort of comports with what I have come to believe. And I want to say, you haven't researched this. Don't give me that.
Yeah.
Right. None of us has researched this. We have not dug into the language and the articles and the words to come to this conclusion. So when I say I think this is fairly accurate, I am giving you really what's ultimately what I'm going to call uninformed, but reasonable conclusion. I'm not going to claim to be an expert on this, but in general, with my experience, I think this is probably decent, although I'm not going to sit there and say I know better than these people.
It's an educated evaluation.
It's an educated evaluation. Thank you.
It's not a
yeah.
And same here. There's a lot of these news sources on here that I've been familiar with. I consume a lot of media over the years, and so I've consumed enough of them. And it's a what do I want to say? It's a shades of things in terms of how things fit. Where exactly on the quadrants I would place various things, I don't know. But as a general configuration, it feels right to me. Just from what I've seen from various sources. And I know that if I want to get a more conservative opinion about a particular issue that's happening, I'll go look at the Wall Street Journal. I know that they're more conservative. If I want something that's a more left-leaning opinion, trying to figure out how they're looking at the story, you might go to New York Times or someplace like that. I see clips by Morning Joe. I see stuff from Fox News on YouTube and places like that. So I see enough of the stuff that.
Yeah, and I think that's
a plan. Yeah.
No, the important point that you make too is that I'm like you. I always want to ask people who say, okay, so you're a conservative. Do you read more liberal perspectives?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're liberal. Do you read more conservative perspective as well? Because if you don't, you really can't say you're informed. I'm sorry, you just can't. So I read editorials from the Wall Street Journal. I read editorials from the New York Times. I do the same thing with you. I don't have cable, but I get on and I get news clips of various from Fox News, from CNN, MSNBC, and other places.
Right.
The difference is, here's the thing. As a professor, one of the things I say to students is, and now let me stop sharing this because we're going to put the other one up in a minute.
Sure.
So, are we back?
I can see you. Yep.
All right. So one of the things I say to my students, if they have a paper that they have to write, And I say to them, you will not be graded on your position or your conclusion. I don't grade on that. So if you write a paper that I disagree with your conclusion, particularly if it's a paper in like Christian ethics or something, and I disagree with your conclusion, if you've made a competent argument, you will get a good grade.
Right.
By the same token, if you write a paper and I agree with the conclusion, but your argument is terrible,
right,
you're not going to get a good grade.
Yeah.
So for me, so I say that to say, I read editorialists, op-eds from writers over the years, both left and right, who I have come to trust because they're thoughtful. They make reasonable, even if I disagree with their conclusion.
Exactly.
They give me something to chew on.
Right.
I will not read or watch the shills. Because they are, and there's shills on both the left and the right, because they've become peddlers of snake oil, and I'm not going to imbibe that stuff. And so there's discernment here, and you have to do the hard work of doing that. And you know, in an information overloaded age, because this is no longer the day of your town newspaper and Walter Cronkite. This is the internet age, and we are what's that meme I've seen? We are awash in information but starving for truth, or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, gotcha.
Where there's so much of that you and I, if we want to be informed and be thoughtful and have a reasonable understanding, you and I must do the hard work. And so the hard work of discernment. And you know, I told you this before we went on. I have a Facebook friend, and who probably doesn't watch this, so but she, like a lot of people, just likes to post stuff that agrees with her, even if it borders on conspiracy stuff.
Right.
So for a while, I was kind of needling her online. I would just post a link, you know, in response to say that's not really true about this person or that or the other, etc. And so she finally got to the place where she would still post it, but she would say, I haven't had time to fact check this, so I don't know if it's true.
Right. Yeah.
Which again, okay, so here's what you did. You're not interested in doing the hard work of knowing what's true. But by the way, you threw that out there in the hope that some people will be influenced by the nonsense that you're posting.
Right.
And that is just so intellectually lazy. I don't know. I just don't know how else to respond to that. Michael, if you and I want to be informed, and if you and I at least want to post things on social media that we think are important for other people to see, then we better have well done our homework. Because as the old saying goes, you are entitled to your own opinions, but you are not entitled to your own facts.
Right. And I think this becomes especially true when we're talking about circulating information that is about people or about organizations and what they said or what they didn't say, and misrepresenting that and just putting out this, well, I haven't fact checked this, but this looks really interesting. Well, basically what you're doing is you're spreading gossip. You're tarnishing somebody's name if you have not confirmed that there is some merit to what's being circulated.
Yes.
So I think, and that the part of this is and maybe I don't know if you're ready to transition into this, but I think that the part of this that is so destructive to me is that, and I'm talking about for Christians.
Yeah.
So we're talking about it's important to try to get to the truth. We should be wanting to know what the truth is. We recognize our own frailties and that we may misunderstand what the truth is because of biases that we have. God needs to work in us to transform us to see things differently. But to the world, when we are citing falsehoods, things that can be demonstrably shown not to be true, and we're circulating those as truth, what is the watching world to say about what we have to say about Jesus?
Yeah.
About who God is, about what Scripture says, so on and so forth. If we are that willing to be that irresponsible and unquestioning and just circulate whatever little thing pops up in an email that somebody sent us, or somebody posted a meme on Facebook page and just circulate that without any thought, what does that tell the watching world about who Christians are and Christianity is about? And it is so destructive to the faith and to Christian witness. You're to the person who's doing it, it's destructive to their Christian witness. But then when people come to believe and they see so many people doing that are calling themselves Christians, then it just tarnishes the whole witness of the church. And I think that from a Christian perspective ought to be particularly concerning.
It is. I am egregiously. I mean, the egregious behavior of Christians spreading stuff so willy-nilly is really a severe undermining of the gospel.
Absolutely.
Because of course we believe Jesus is the truth. He says in John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and life. And we believe Jesus is the truth. As I said to one person recently, if Christians believe all truth is God's truth, we're not. I mean, if everything is in existence because of God, then we're not afraid of the truth, even if the truth doesn't confirm us, or even if the truth makes us uncomfortable. By the way, one of the things about the Bible, this is another thing in reference to this, the Bible has no problem telling the truth about its own people.
Absolutely.
I mean, seriously.
Right.
The Bible has no problem being very clear about the foibles and frailties of the heroes of the faith.
Right.
And we today, we would rather cover things up that make us uncomfortable. When this is a lot of what we see now with book bannings and some of the stuff happening in Florida and Texas and Florida and other places, is that we as Christians, we can't be honest about. I mean, so here's the thing I say in reference to this. As a Christian, there are two things that I owe, not only other Christians, but the world. Mm-hmm. I owe them the truth. Right. Now, that doesn't mean everything I say is right, but I need to I owe people the truth as best as I understand it. Tentatively subject to change, maybe.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. I owe them the truth, to tell the truth, but I owe it to discern the truth.
Right.
To make sure that whatever the issue is or whatever the matter is, that I am doing due diligence to make sure what I know and what then I start dispensing is accurate. And this is the problem right now that's going on, is that people are just, you get the conspiracy theories, and Christians are just diving into this with no discernment as to what is going on. And I really think that it undermines the gospel. I think there are certain people today, particularly some younger people, who this is one of the reasons, among others, they're so turned off to the church. Absolutely. Because the church just goes after this wild nonsense.
Yes.
And just because it's what we want to believe. Right. And so this is an issue that's at the heart of the gospel. Because like you say, Michael, how am I supposed to, if you're not a Christian and I believe that Jesus is the Savior and Lord, and you and I want to have a conversation about that over coffee, how are you going to believe me if I'm peddling QAnon nonsense?
Right.
And January 6th was a false flag. The FBI was in on it, and all this kind of, or back at 9/11 when you had some people on the left even talking about how it was an inside job or Bush knew about it. Again, how are people supposed to take? You may, at the end of the day, Joe Q agnostic may not embrace my understanding of the gospel and Jesus, but I at least want them to hope that they walk away thinking that I'm reasonable and thoughtful and not an idiot because I've embraced so much nonsense.
Right. And I wish I could remember the quote exactly. Augustine had something in his little homily that he had about creation where he talks about he says something about if I speak untruth about something about which somebody else knows more and it's not truth, what will they then evaluate when I talk to them about what the scripture says, what God says, if I'm speaking untruth about other things? And I think about the mission of the church is not the mission of the church to be this other witness to the world about what the truth is. It's supposed to unmask untruth that exists in the world, and to unmask that by living in a community that's different from what the world is used to, by the way they talk to each other, the way they live their lives, to be that witness. Well, so the world may not know what that true witness is. That's the reason we're supposed to be here, is to give voice to that witness, to show it. They may not know what that is, but they are capable of knowing the truth about other issues that have nothing to do with the church. And when we're speaking nonsense and we're perpetuating lies and gossip and hate and all these various types of things, then how are they going to evaluate the message of what the church is truly trying to communicate?
Absolutely right.
And you just undercut everything that the church stands for by participating in this kind of nonsense. So yeah, I think from the standpoint of the church, we definitely need to understand the media, and we don't want to perpetuate truth. And I think those, apart from any religious connotation or Christian connotation, are worthy goals in and of themselves. But from the church, it should be monstrously more important for us to be seeking the truth and to communicate the truth as best we can, for the reasons I just mentioned.
One of the things I have never said to people, unlike a lot of Christians who've said it to me, I will never say I stopped watching, I stopped reading, I stopped listening to so-and-so because they're too conservative or they're too liberal.
Right.
What I've said is I've stopped listening to them because they can't be trusted with a reasonable understanding of the truth.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's where the analysis of looking at things is trying to understand how factually accurate is any particular source I'm listening to when somebody's telling me something. And if you follow enough people or enough organizations long enough, you start to develop a track record, like you said, of trust. You read a columnist who writes various opinion pieces. You begin to realize, okay, there's a pattern of thoughtfulness here that's useful. You read others and you realize there's a pattern of stuff that's totally unhelpful. And so I think some of that over time. But anytime a news source pops up that has something that really excites me or I think is interesting, and I've never heard of this person before, what's the first thing I'm do? I'm on the internet. What's this person's background? Where do they get their education? Who are they hanging out with? What's the, because I want a sense of what context they're speaking from. Yeah. And sometimes you find out that there are some very dubious people who are very well at crafting messages that push my buttons that I don't want to be associated with. So that's there. You got to do some work.
And there are some people, and the reality is, because of the internet age, everybody who thinks they have an opinion about something that's valid can now express it. You no longer have an editor blocking the doorway. Right. I mean, you can just spew whatever, and you can get on and you can find followers. And I mean, I agree with that. One of the things, by the way, this is Research 101. This is what you're taught in school when you're researching, is that that if I get a book and I see and it looks interesting, but I don't know who the author is, what do? Well, I can get on the internet, but the first thing I do the first thing I do in a book, I don't go to the preface or chapter 1. I look at the index. I look at the bibliography.
Right.
First of all, I want to know where they're from, but then, so I look at the back cover, and then I go to the index or bibliography, and I say, who are their conversation partners?
Right. Yeah.
Who? Right. Because if it's a subject I'm reading on that I know, I want to know who they're talking to. Who are they not talking to? Now, depending on the subject, there can be just lots of stuff out there. You can't engage everybody, but I want to know that they have engaged major voices, and I want to know that they have engaged a variety of voices. And so that's the first thing I do, even before I start reading the text itself.
Right.
Gotcha. So it's work. It's work.
Yep, it is. Yeah.
All right, let's put one more thing up on, and this is let me share it again here.
Okay.
I'm so savvy at this. This is from a website called Ground News. So tell us a little bit about this. And again, folks, for those who are listening, we'll put this in the description. So tell us about Ground News.
Well, Ground News I like in that they try to aggregate stories from across the various political spectrums, a variety of places. And if you look under that first story there, it's telling you, and I think it's is it left on? Yeah. So they got left, center, and right as to how they evaluate the stories, how stories are presented. So this first one up here, it looks like their stories kind of maybe almost 50% towards the left, 50% center, and then a few stories off to the right. So it's a left-leaning publication, it appears, and each story they have a rating for this for how they may fit on the spectrum. So when you're looking at the story, you get a sense of what the bias is of that particular news reporting organization. And the stories I find very helpful because you can flip through here and you can look at a particular event or story that's happening, and you can see right there together multiple sources who are reporting on it from different angles. They have a premium service, which you can do some other things with, where you can look only at left stories, only at right stories, depending on which side you're trying to evaluate at the moment. I don't have that premium service, but I think it's an aggregator, but it's not just throwing them blindly together. It allows you to be able to look and add another layer, another filter to decide how you're going to evaluate the story you're about to read. And that useful.
I'm looking here on the screen now, the Ukraine, they've got these blind spots, certain articles, certain things they say blind spots. So, So here's the one on Ukraine. So, because it's got both. So the left story on the left, as I'm moving my little arrow in here, leaked documents. So U.S. asked Ukraine not to attack Russia on anniversary of, and it says of the 10 sources, only 14%, it's only 14% leaning left. So it means it's mostly conservative sources. So they say that's a blind spot because it's mostly right. Over on the next one to the right, Ukraine war looms over Switzerland UN presidency. And this one, it's a blind spot because it's only 7% of 20 sources. There's only 7% that lean toward the right. So it's mostly left. So what they want to say is, and I think this is right. You and I have talked about the horseshoe theory of ethics and knowledge. And that the more partisan you get, or the more extreme you get, the less, I'm going to say, the less, frankly, self-critical you are.
Right.
And so what it is that so again, it isn't biased toward one way or another. It's saying here's these sources, here's where we have determined that they lean, and how this all works together. You can now check into it, do some reading, and see what and try and get to what the best understanding of the situation is, right?
Exactly, right. And just the fact that certain news organizations will gravitate towards covering certain kind of stories, others will gravitate towards covering others. And that helps to have a service like this, allows you to be able to see not only what the take is on stories that are hitting your radar, but also to see what stories aren't hitting your radar because of the news organizations you follow. So anyway, I found it a helpful tool. There's no perfect way.
And that's actually, by the way, Michael, it seems to me another argument for why we need to be a little diverse in our seeking. We complain about the bias of the media, and rightly so. I want to say to those of us who imbibe the news, it cuts both ways. We also have our biases, and what a lot of people really get upset about is not that the news media is biased. It's the news media, certain outlets are not biased in the way I want them to be biased.
Right. Yes. They don't fit my narrative.
They don't fit my narrative. They don't fit my narrative. Yeah. So I'm not going to listen to them. And all right. Well, I think we're about time. This has been a great discussion. And I wonder where Ground News would put our broadcasts. So
this little spiral squirrely little thing.
Squirrely thing, and Iron Man rolling his eyes.
Yes, that's right.
So any final things, Michael, that you want to add for the good? Oh, but you know what I should ask?
Yeah.
What news sources do you like to read? I mean, you read a variety. You're like me. I know you read a lot of stuff.
Right.
Just any news sources that you either read or watch, or people you listen to or read regularly, and give me, that you like. I mean, like not because they agree with you, but like because you think they give you good stuff.
Right. I mean, there's BBC is one that I like for international news. They tend to generally report things in a responsible manner. What was it? Somebody said talking about if the world were to come to end, they want the BBC reporting it because they give you accurate news, but you still feel good about it. So there's just something about that very calming British accent, that just makes it feel so good.
Yeah. So as a fisherman, the world is ending. So screw the limit on largemouth bass.
That's right. That's right. There you go. So, but I think the BBC does a pretty good, accurate job of doing those. Boy, I don't have any websites. I don't generally go to websites. I go to aggregators. And so it's just kind of as stories pop up. I mean, there's political stories that are from things like The Hill. There's things from the Wall Street Journal. I see stories pop up that are political stuff, but I also see stories that are from more left-leaning or the major news sources, NBC, CBS, that give sort of a basic story. Associated Press is another one that pops up in my newsfeed a lot, which is trying to give a reasonably informationally correct, perspective on things. So no, I don't do a lot. I don't know if there's any particular sources that I would really highlight as saying these are the ones you need to go to. So,
yeah. No, I actually, as you said that, I was thinking on my tablet and my computer, I have news aggregates, but I don't have any apps from CNN or Fox or MSNBC or any of that. It's all aggregate. It's all bring it together, and I can just kind of scroll down and kind of work through things. So yeah.
Right.
All right. Yeah. Very good. All right. Well, Michael, really good. So so between now and then, work on a news story to make it look like the Royals are going to win the World Series this year. See what kind of a twist and spin you can put on that.
Well, the Royals marketing department works on that every year.
Do they?
Yes. We're on to them. We know.
I think maybe they need a house cleaning.
Yeah.
I hear Tucker Carlson's looking for a job.
There you go. He can do it. That's right.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, my friends. All right. Hey, friends, thanks for joining us again. As always, we appreciate it. I am Allan Bevere, and and here we are at Faith Seeking Understanding University. The patron saint of Faith Seeking Understanding is Anselm of Canterbury, who said, "I do not understand in order to believe, but I believe in order to understand." So, friends, keep seeking.